Yeah, so thank you all for coming. People, they're remote too. This event is organized by the Paulo Freire Initiative, which was founded by Brazilian students, workers, and professors at the College from University. Today's event will be taught by Professor Alessandra Vannucci. Professor Vannucci is professor in stage and direction at the Federal University of Madrid. Currently a visiting scholar at ILAS, Colombia. As a theater of the press activist since 1993, she realizes social art projects in schools, communities, jails in Italy, Brazil, and overall. In 2009, she co-created Teatro das Oprimidas, methodology focusing women's body oppression. As a researcher, she works on subjects related to her practice, focusing the work of Augusto Boal, the living theater, and other activist practices. She wrote several books. She's currently working on women refugees work in photography. Among them, Claudia Anduja, whose exhibition is currently at the Shad. She's a distinguished stage director and playwright, and we're very honored to have you with us. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Renata, I thank you very much for this introducing, and I thank you all who are present here. And I thank all the people who are coming online. I wanted to see them, but at this moment we have this technology which focuses just in who is speaking, then on me. But I hope that this will not be like a very annoying situation, because Renata invited to make it a webinar. Then not just people that is in the room, but you too. Tom, Daniel, Professor Evandro, my dear colleagues, which are there. I think Guilmar is coming as well. You can speak when you can. I don't know how this will work. I hope wonderfully. Globalization, it's a nightmare, but it has some advantages. Then this is one. I'm very proud to be here representing not Brazil, of course, but Latin America in this institute, which I really appreciate the invitation of ILAS, which I'm a visiting scholar. I had this enormous privilege to be orientated during these 3 months by Professor Michael Tosig, and I would like to make my thanks to the support that we received by the Transformative Learning Technology Lab, led by Professor Paulo Wittgenstein, who was the one, in fact, that invited me to give this talk, the Lehman Center for Brazilian Studies and the ILAS. And for this event, we are especially grateful for the support of Paulo Wittgenstein, Inara Bezerra, Renata, Penadra, and Amber. And I wanted to thank as well, who is not here and she will not be here, but a very good friend that I learned in these 3 months, which is Maria José Contreras. She's an associate professor in human state Colombia. And I wanted to invite you to, because next Thursday, Paulo invited me again, another talk, which will be on our artistic work. And me and Maria José, who is Chilean, and we really matched. And then we will do as well. I would like that we like a very interactive and laboratory practice. É isso, agradeci todo mundo. Then I will begin, and please interrupt me if you want, make questions, make commentaries. I will try to not to respond at that very moment, but to try to conduct what I'm saying, and after in the ending, I collect all the answers and I try to give you satisfaction. Okay, then we can begin. Then Boal, this work is on Boal's contribution to a decolonized Southern epistemology. And Boal's fame, and then I wanted to say that I had to grow a little bit with my reflection of Boal, because 3 years ago I gave a talk to the 13th seminar in the Center for Critical Thought on relationship among Boal and Paulo Freire, which you can find online. Then I couldn't give the same talk again. Then I try to, because you can go on the 13th seminar and right there, Alessandra Vannucci, you will see my seminar. Then at this moment, I was I try to advance it a bit and try to, you will see, try to put some other points on my as a target on my talk. And Boal's fame, because Boal is famous, of course, was internationally established in the 70s with the book Teatro do Oprimido e Outras Estéticas Políticas, Theater of the Oppressed and Other Political Aesthetics, first published in Buenos Aires in 74 in Spanish then, and translated into various languages. It was written not only during his first year of exile, away from Brazil after being imprisoned and tortured in 71, but as well during a period of forced experimentalism. Of course, while he was experimentalist, but in this case, he could not do any conventional work. He was forced to experimentalism, being a director without a theater and without his group, and unable to announce his name on the poster because of the risk of being censored and persecuted. In Argentina as well, there was a dictatorship in a few years. In this period, then, writing books as well as creating invisible theater, newspaper theater, we will speak about that, but maybe some of you already know, and a play with an unusual and uncanny autobiographical imprint, such as Torquemada, which I will speak as well, come back in the final of this talk. Wow, researchers paths in theatrical theory and practice that seem to willingly overcome the characteristic engagement of his production in São Paulo, Teatro Político. And then during the 60s, he was this kind of director, very concentrated on Teatro Político, engaged theater. And in the 70s, he tried to overcome this. Instead of producing political theater as an artist, Boal began to understand his role as an artist as if it was a pedagogue and multiplier of aesthetic tools put at the disposal of political struggles. And he does not do any more political theater, but he does develop tools for political struggles, other people's political struggles. In this sense, much of his later work, which we will speak about, we don't speak today about the work of Boal in the 60s or the 50s, we speak about the work of Boal in the 70s, 90s. When I knew him, well, after I tell you why.
Recording in progress.
But she did say something. She did say something about my being in Brazil. I'm Italian. I am in Brazil because Boal is not like if I met Jesus, but it's quite similar because it was my maestro. And then I was a practitioner. I practice all that I know of theater of the press. I learned practicing and being trained by Boal. Then, in this sense, much of his later work coincides with an option for non-violent tactics as alternatives to taking up arms against totalitarian regimes. Not only the Brazilian military dictatorship, but any oppressive power. Instead of a repertoire of plays, that is what we normally do as a playwriters, directors, Boal began to accumulate a collection of techniques, or, as he preferred to say, an arsenal of theatrical weapons, arsenal de armas teatrais, which could be used by oppressed classes and groups to fight their oppressors and oppression. Then this is quite big, huge, general, and then we will try to concentrate. Want to see welcome. New techniques like image theater, form theater, and rainbow of design methodology were added to this arsenal during Boal's exiled life, while he was wandering in Latin America, New York, and Europe, in contact with several modes of oppression and in dialogue with various contemporary artistic and pedagogical practices in order to face oppression. And his own oppression as well, of course. And in many cases, the techniques are solutions for real life, for existence, for survival. Fundamental among those was the dialogue with pedagogy of the oppressed of his compatriot and fellow exile, Paulo Freire, in the Paulo Freire Initiative, which as well was first published in Spanish, Madrid, 1970, and as well translated into various languages. It is Cecilia Boal's opinion that Boal's first book title was assigned by editor Daniel Divinsky, considering the international impact of Freire's work. But in my opinion, the dialogue is not limited to the title. And similar to Freire Education for Freedom, Bois' methodology is based on the understanding that human socialization processes such as instruction, information, institutionalization, bureaucracy, incorporate behaviors imposed or induced by hegemonic mechanisms, such as school, media, state. Then, the process itself tends to inhibit subjectivity and mechanized bodies. With society itself being oppressive, it is essential that oppressed people recover autonomy for free themselves, not waiting to be released, but emancipating and no longer subjugating themselves to social regimes. And autonomy is important about that. The very point for Bois is how to empower citizenship and what art can serve to this purpose, and not serve on the contrary, to control and disciplinary regimes that suppress transformation impulses of people and reduce to mass of consumers, as he makes clear since the famous first chapter of the Oppressed. Then the starting point is completely Freire. Then from the statement that a citizen is not one who lives in the city, but one who transforms it, which is a very famous phrase, wow, that I will try here to analyze it a bit. He comes to the assumption that artist is any citizens who, knowing how to do something, and sharing its means of production, makes art in the sense of doing something, an instrument of citizenship. And the art is not specialized field, but is something that someone know how to do and decide to multiply as an instrument of citizenship. And is famous, and the famous provocation. Well, as we say, anyone can be an actor, even an actor. And theater can be done everywhere, even in theaters, which shouldn't stop anyone from being a professional actor, of course, just as the fact that everyone runs or plays soccer, like in Brazil, does not at all prevent someone from being a champion. Do you understand that? The fact that it says that everyone can make theater does not prevent someone to be a professional actor. This in the same way that the fact that everyone plays football or soccer does not prevent Maradona to be Maradona. Do you agree? Then this is quite interesting because normally artists have some suspect about that. They don't want that. What they know how to do, everyone does. And maybe it's we always cry about crisis in theater. That's why, because we have a lot of people in football or in football stadium, isn't it? Why? Everyone would answer because everyone plays football. Why we have theater on the contrary completely divided and not interesting to anyone because no one plays theater. Then we have to think about it again. Art should be capable of awakening the impulse for active participation and community coexistence and stimulating the search for new forms of learning and transmission of knowledge, being then a remedy or an antidote. This is my word, not our word, but I like the word antidote, which is kind of Foucault word. I think it's quite interesting. An antidote to the narcissistic individualism and separation among real life and appearance in the Société du Spectacle, which the board describes 1967, and we are in the same years. And which seems to be completely submerged. And this was real and complete in 1967, today maybe much more. Then at this moment, it becomes clear for Bois that art proposed is not art itself or an artwork, like for example, but is to overcome oppression and change reality whereas it's unjust. Do you understand? Then the finality of art is not art, it's changing reality. The arsenal of technique, which Bois in his successive books have been giving a theoretical framework, indissoluble from the liberating practice which fed it, is a platform for the exploration of concrete topics. The method, very quickly, theater of the oppressed, is actually applied by millions of people on 5 continents, and I'm not exaggerating, it's really very expensive. in the sense of expansion, as a tool for political struggle and transformation in social scenarios. In the panorama of arts, it stands out due to its inclusive methodology, accessible to any person without prerequisite, appropriated by activist communities and studied in university. Its differential, established in the social and pedagogical field of study we see in the United States especially, receive, however, much less attention in the aesthetic field. Regarding the arts criticism of bibliography, Boal's international concentration coincided with his fixation as an object of study a little bit dated to his achievement in the 70s. But this is not Boal's fault. This is the critical art fault. Then Boal, but instead of being fixed over the successive decades, the TO methodology evolved, seemingly being tuned with the contemporary practices and reflections marked by the insurgency of a critical thought that did not accept the order that was in power in the 70s. We're thinking about Boal, exiled in the 70s after being invented theater of the oppressed. And from the other side, my intervention here is trying to interrupt or to change the critical arts insistence in thinking that Boal stopped there and until stopped there. This is not true. Then I will try to show how works this evolution. I would like to recall the work of international artists such as the Brazilian Elliot Sica, the American Living Theater, and Richard Schechner. This is the name that I can say. In the ambience of the New York counterculture, because I did as well last year, 9 years, where Boal was a key figure. He was invited in person several times beginning in 71, such as an ambience, this is the countercultural ambience in New York, radically shifted the focus from the product to the processes of human interaction provoked by its performance, to an extent that the perceptive and cognitive relationship between creators and spectators become more essential than the artwork in itself. This we call the passing to the performing art, to the performance as the art. Then it's something that in New York is very easy to understand when you go to the moment you see Paulo and you think about how Paulo was painting. What was interesting was not the work in itself, unless now it's like expensive to buy. The market reappropriated that, okay, but leave the market and think about Paulo. What they wanted to do was not showing the art, the work of art, but showing his processes in doing this work. And what it was interesting to him was the relationship that the process, the artistic process was creating between the artist, among the artist and the spectators. Is it clear? And this is a very New York anthropological idea, and Boal is there in the 70s, sharing the same thing. You understand? It's not an artwork that interested him, is the multiplying of means of being of making art. Then this understanding expanded the field of fine and performing arts in an aesthetic regime, which we can describe as relational, which is following Nicolas Goriot, a very recent bibliography of the 90s, which is the relational art, would be an art capable of generating new forms of subjectivation and community relations. Then this is very active, this is contemporary, this is postmodern. I would like to recall as well, the second thing I want to recall, in Western performing arts, the spread of sensible experiences such as Grotowski, Bob Wilson, May, and many several others, which have been till now to achieve with many companies and theater group, which have been which are working with a sensible regime and trying to regain a field that has been reduced by the text-based hegemonic culture in modernity. Then, from the current postmodern point of view, which is a sensible regime in arts, such reduction to the text, which was the modern concept of making theater in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, is to be labeled as like for example, Rancière Labo, an epistemological deviation. Then Rancière, for example, says that what happens in the theater in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, which was the text hegemony instead of all the other regimes, it's an epistemological deviation. These 2 points, which I recall here: one, the displacement of interest in the work into the relationship provoked by it, and two, the expansion of performing regime to a synesthetic and sensitive action in order to be accessible to any person, even illiterate. These 2 points are characteristics which I found present and would like to emphasize in Boal's work during his exile and after his return to Brazil, which happens in 1986. Then this is the period that after the big I moved in. Of course, standing in France part of his artistic maturity, Boal possibly attuned the structuralist critical thought, deepened his theoretical and practical reflection on the function of art and artists in society of spectacle, which I already quoted. And of course, its transfer in the rainbow of desire technique, la cancel du désir, its transfer of liberation struggles from the political field to the biopolitical field, which is the recognition that oppression can be internated, I don't know how to say that, internated, and not depend anymore on the physical presence of one or more antagonists, because you can internate the antagonists as well. Suggested a dialogue of Boal with Foucault, of course, all Foucault propositions, transferred by Boal in practice and laboratories. Further on, such as the rainbow of desire, which is formally influenced by Foucault, I think. Further on, Boal's treatment of what he calls regimes of control. That it's clearly quoting Deleuze. Financial, media, and economic systems described and interconnected to the service of the empire, and he used this word in his book, the last one, Estética do Oprimido, which is published in Brazil in 2009. I am the translator to Italian, and I know quite well this book, and the most contemporary is in English, French, and Italian. Suggested, but I'm not sure, a reading by Boal of Michael Howard and Tony Negri, which was published in 2000. I don't know this book. Was identified with the capitalist West, no longer invades, Boal's interest in those studies is the turning of art into industry, through which the empire, how it has called, and must always identify with the capitalist West, and in this stop there in the 70s. We always speak when it's the empire is the West. It's not the Russian empire, something else, is the West. Okay. But let's accept this. And he says that this empire no longer invades and colonizes territories, but brains. Art industry with its hegemonic means, such as television and Hollywood cinema, as well, monopolizes desires and inhibits the individual's creativity, aiming to degrade people to consumer, which is domesticated, anesthetized, and consensual. So we could say nothing new in relation to to understand Boal differential. I need to return to the 70s bibliography by Boal, when he quotes Frankfurt School, he was reading that as well, warning about the abuse of mimetic arts in totalitarian regimes. Please remember that this included in both fascism and the culturalism, not just fascism. That is what I can say. Then cinema, arts, it's like shocking when you read it first time. It's so so sad. According to Horkheimer, Adorno, a book of 1947, dialectical wars, and dialectical enlightenment. Art, when made concrete as a merchandise, produces, as a commodity, produces, such as any other simulacra, increasingly subjugating aesthetic experience, which tend to alienate the working class, I speak in the word, into a mass of consumers of illusory happiness, while life itself remains unattainable in the real world. And their example is so popular. But think about social media. It's not at all a separated situation. I think it's not to resolve the problem. Well, does not align with such negativity. Does not align with such negativity. Does not theorize the end of art once reduced to commodity. To the contrary, Boal claims art as a language capable of generating consciousness and community, as said already. The affirmative posture toward art seems to be urgently autobiographic, giving basis to Boal's option for art as a form of political activism, when no other fighting action seems possible anymore, unless you take up guns. You understand? And it would not be in a moment in which you could take up guns, being incarcerated and tortured. And the way that Boal escaped from prison, you read the book, because I don't know now that it was fine. You know, if you came back, you would not have meat. If he came back at the moment, what was not allowed, of course. Then it was quite extreme situation. The affirmative posture toward arts seemed to be urgently autobiographic. Then I say this affirmative action coincides with the forced renunciation to the professional platform as a director. And the coherent abdication, when I said before, a forced experimentalism, it's a little bit like that as well. It was a very established director. He could go on doing the work. It was really okay, because he was the one that Chico Buarque and Caetano said, wow, don't make me for it. Oh my God. He was a very established state director. Then he could go on, and he was forced to abandon this place and to give himself to an experimentalism, wandering experimentalism, then being sometimes unable to tell his own name because of being because of the risk, the political risk. Then the professional platform, he was a forced renunciation, but as well a coherent abdication, and this is voluntary, to the prerogative of aesthetic authorship, which turns out to be exclusive when depending on the market. Then it gives up to this. And it seems to me it is political, Boal's provocation, which I first quoted, that everyone is an artist, even artists, etc., etc. It's not just a joke, it is political because of its coherent consequences. I say, anyone, even an illiterate person, can do poetry, can be a painter, can be an actor, etc., etc. It is, in fact, a broad invitation to affirmative action or activism through art, today we call it activism, that deflates the essential question about the function of art, so often retired from the debate. And I venture to say that its retirement, being an artist, I have to admit, depends on the fact that forces to rediscuss the artist's function and not just the circulators. Then it's something that artists never want to do. Thus, Boal's understanding of critical thought proposals and application in his own practice has a theoretical impact in the aesthetics, which has been largely underestimated or omitted by studies in aesthetics, since it redefines the function of artists and art in society. Many interesting questions arise now. I will not answer to all of them, but I will try. How does Boal dialogue with philosophers who think about those relations, such as Foucault, expression financière, etc., with the difference of Boal being an artist? Question. How does Boal places in the pantheon of the 20th century artists whose work focuses those relations, such as Tchaikovsky, Artaud, Brecht, Mushkin, and the living theater, etc., with the difference of Boal being Latin American? What distinguishes features make theatrical press technique stands out in the broad panorama of contemporary activism, the today panorama? While I already say that most people say that this technique are dated. How I can bring that in the today panorama of art? Trying to respond, I will recognize some of Boal's techniques and ideas, which I found able to turn consolidated aesthetics convention, to turn around, to completely invert, completely erupt, destroy. And I will try to prove that his contribution to the world theater is crucial because it points out a decolonial or decolonial claim radically connected to the Latin American geopolitical reality and foretells an epistemic turn, which has more recently been pointed as Southern extinction. First idea, I will tell 4 ideas and the conclusion, okay? First idea, from his clear experience in theater, outside theater, and with the non-actors, Boal's idea is that none may be excluded from a creative experience and reduce it to consumer. No one. This does not only mean establishing a new function for the audience, but eliminating the concept of audience per se. Intended as a group of people which is coerced into passivity and limited to a mere contemplative and passive functions, such as to be a spectator, which is not a very good thing, because you pay to stay there, silence, and still for 2 hours. And it's not a very good thing. In a premeditated space, in fact, the theatrical buildings, where the separation from actors is evident in the physical distance among stage and audience, sometimes is an idleness as well, like 1.30 meters, separating the artists, which can tell and create and do things, and the spectators that must be there, and if they sneak, they don't have to make all noise. This is the pact, the pact that the edifice suggests. While Artaud's dreams, Artaud dreams for a theater without spectator, Artaud says theater sans spectator, which obviously does not mean an audience of empty chairs. Of course, was evoking a ritual of metamorphosis and contagion. Boal's idea is to set a game of the ritual which engages everyone which is present. In rituals, described by anthropologists such as Victor Turner and Michael Pastor, of course, my dear Michael, who study performing and mimetic behaviors in rituals. In rituals as well as in games, the performance produces a kind of presence defined not by the given contents, but by the way the players play or make themselves present in the fiction set. It's something that occupies an entire book by Hans-Georg Gadamer, which is wonderful, and I suggest you do it. Then the experience of entering into game transforms not only the playing, but the player. Is this experience that Boal transferred into practice, the best example being the forum theater technique, proposed in Peru in '73, when Boal was involved in a popular literacy campaign inspired by Freire Initiative. Freire was not there, but it was there the year before and the year after, and they were really cooperating, not in the same way. How is it work? Which are the rules of this game? After the first part of the play, in which the actor stage premeditated dramatic situation, there is a second part in which spectators come on stage and wear the costume or some object of one or other character they choose. And at that point, they get the power of modifying actions and script as well, in order to resist and overcome the oppression which they identify in the proposed dramatic situation. Is it clear? This is theater forum theater. The closed structure of drama opens completely. There's no ending. The player there's no ending. It's interesting because there's no destiny, there's no happy ending or bad ending. It just opens, you know. And then the player enters physically into stage and reenact with his body the conflict, offering his own solution to the conflict that oppresses the other. And I say with his body because a body is a repertoire, is a memory. Not all the body are the same. We have all our own experiences, social, rational, and then is this body that enters in an individual body, a differential body, not staying in your place and saying, ah, do this, do that, move here. No, you have to go there and make the struggle work. In doing so, he or she rehearses its own transforming power and realizes that may transform reality and not only contemplate, criticize, or describe reality. The entering in the game proves the existing transforming power of the solutions which are offered by players. And this power may be transferred to reality. I say maybe and not is, because of course the game does not change reality, but empower people on the possibility of changing it. Is it clear? Second idea. Even if the goal is transforming reality, Boal's intention is to no longer explain people which struggles are important for freedom and justice, and no longer give moral advice about what is right or wrong to do. He's over with this. He doesn't want to do it. This is very clear. Instead, the context is offered a located dimension in where an equal and relational experience may occur, such as improvising and collectively creating in an open, interactive, and incomplete, remember, drama open format of the game, which is incomplete, the game. Until the moment the players play the game is incomplete, isn't it? This set evokes the model of the ignorant master who learns together what he does not intend to teach and aims no longer to educate, include, nor even liberate the other, but rather aims to emancipate the community, as by Paulo Freire, clearly, in the 70s, and see after that, repeating, I think, repeating, as what Paulo Freire was saying, being 20 years. Then it's, of course, there are some French people there, of course. It's, of course, a radical decolonizing statement. In form theater, the equal and relational experience, second part of the game, is led by the Joker, which I am, for example, many of you maybe, which is an actor whose, or an actress whose function towards the assembly reverberates the symmetric relationship proposed by Freire for a teacher. This role involves stimulating learning together, each one from others. Remember Freire? We say that the teacher learns from the student as well as the student from the teacher. And this is the idea, through Socratic interactive questioning. Is, well, that what Socrates done, I'm quite cool with that. Transferred to the theatrical assembly, the idea motivates the displacement among audience and stage, so abolishing the distance between artist and non-artist, and establishing a playground where participant acts alternatively as actor and a spectator, which Boal calls spectators, and is not anymore a spectator. Spectators is not anymore a spectator. Thus, it is not the Joker, but the assembly who analyzes the fictional situation described by drama, and research discover the real conditions in which oppression is not always visible or may contain contradictions, even when evident. If we the audience recognize oppression, what will we do to overcome it? This is the typical question of the Joker. If we will not necessarily succeed, but possibly approximate to solutions, adding my intervention to yours in a process of transformation through plural correction, successive and plural. A little bit contradictory as well, because I have an idea, you have a little different, you go to stage and I do something and you do something and I say, oh yeah, we did that, right. It's kind of puzzle that is the audience is able to do and the Joker alone is not, isn't it? It's like the dialogue in sort of the dialogue. It's kind of puzzle as well. There's not someone that has the truth, but the truth is built through the assembly didactic, the learning process. The technique results in a spectacular method of collective learning. Now it's spectacular in the sense that it's really impacting, really wonderful. As in Freire's best intention, it stimulates a cognitive movement not reducible to mere didactic, because eschewing the purpose of conscientization instead of conscientization, it offers opportunities for subjectivation. In the book Teatro Legislativo, 98, Boal makes clear, directly quoting Freire, that his purpose is always been making theater as a transitive political modality which proposed dialogue, interaction, and exchanges. The dialectic conception of theater, negation, affirmation, synthesis, which is here describes, clearly recalls Hegel's philosophical structure and its application by Bertolt Brecht. Especially, I don't know if every one of you knows Bertolt Brecht, but he's one of the most important advisors in theater, which makes a lot of reference because the two are Marxist. Hegelian Marxist, but especially in his learning plays, Lehrstücke, written as scripts for intervention to be made in trade unions and schools in the 30s, Brecht offers a basis in order to stimulate political participation without using demagogical and pamphleteer means, but using mimetic and fictional means. The entire Brechtian career, which was well wandering and exile all life, and practically it could work in theater 6 years and well. Just. Then the entire Brechtian career began under the auspices of Agitprop in the 20s in Germany, is intended to organize the masses through the multiplication and appropriation of the means of artistic production. Thus, workers would be activated as auto-producers. You, of course, remember Benjamin's essay, but these words are Brecht words. Authors are producers are authors, this is very important, of fictional representation of the real, and then the worker could be activated and would learn how to analyze the context of oppression from various points of view and to become aware of the possible changes. The Boal step for words, because I say that they are similar, but I say that Boal has an idea. The Boal step for words is to propose spectators physically come on stage. You understand? Embodying the oppression experience of the other, empathizing with his non-submission, and putting the possible changes to the test. Brecht, my love, my grande maestro, didn't think about that. He didn't dare to do that. Well, dare to do that. Do you understand? It's the same path, but it's a little push, a little bit more. You're like, okay, you have an idea, then go there and do it. And this is very interesting. It's quite interesting. Quite interesting. That can be done, such as in Brecht idea, in schools, theater, trade unions, etc., resulting in a huge expansion of the learning and liberation. This proposal, I will have a little bit more. Well, when you are very tired, you say stop, please. Because I'm on the third year, I have had. This proposal of art being an anti-hegemonic and decolonized relation, which may be offered in public spaces, which give foundation. This point, I don't know if you will be interested, but I really love to tell you, to Christina, which is here, because this point is the product of my research in Europe the last weeks. This is about art being an anti-hegemonic and decolonized relation, which may be offered in public space. It's okay for everyone. I'm going to collect everything that I say, which give foundation to Boal's interactive and immersive techniques, such as approaches to some very impressive discoveries in the revolutionary work of the leading theater in the 70s. Here we have that. During and after the Brazilian trip, in 1771, when confronted with the pedagogical theories of Paulo Freire and many other things. But they really read Paulo Freire, I know that. I read all the diaries of Judith Marini, and she quoted Paulo Freire. After being at the heart of Paris movement in May 68, where a performative move, presuming a lot, okay, if you want some more interesting, we have a huge bibliography of that, and something written by me as well. Where a performative mood came out from the theater in Paris, which was occupied, and invaded the street, aiming to liberate consciences and lifestyles. They, Living Theater, a group, passed through a wandering experience in Brazil, where they intended to establish a non-violent, wonderful revolution in the most violent period of military repression. One Italian would say. And they went there, and with basically studying Portuguese as a defending tool. Then there, after a deceiving period in residence at Teatro Oficina, a São Paulo theater company, they decided to move all this working process to the favelas, they were called there this way. After we had a term which this name was considered disqualifying, I use again because I think it's this colonial. And then favelas, the very poor boroughs which mud roads, where they, the interior would offer performative situation as public acts. This was the name. Then wow calling games, and then they call public acts, in which at any moment a self-liberating action could take place coming from the audience. Then at the very moment when one of the poorest of the poor, when we are in a very 17th vocabulary, I hope that you have passion to that, because today we can understand it's a little bit irritating, but this is the way they describe it. The damned of the head, as Fanon 64, takes the initiative of entering the scene to interrupt the violence-based saying, which is being performed. As Julian Beck says, he says, audience vanishes. In the sense that everyone which is present begins to perform and see himself in performance, which means able and empowered to change reality. You see how the fiction works? A wonderful non-violent revolution happens in a common state of consciousness. You see? It's not a junk thing. It's not just, because they were a little bit charged, but they were a very big anarchic and political thinking about that. Then wonderful non-violent revolution happens in a common state of consciousness. Few months later, all of them, Living Theatre members and Boal, were arrested by DOPS, Department of Political Police, and expelled. We have it here, Thomas, which is part of this group, with the difference of Boal's passport being taken, so that it was in fact exiled forever. It's not a very good situation. They met again in New York in March 72, when participating with other artists and political activists, which Thomas helped me to identify, in a panel on which art is revolutionary. This was the title of the panel. Which art is revolutionary? At the presence of French Marxist critic Bernardot during the Latin American Fair of Opinion organized by Boal at the Anchor College, where the aforementioned play Torquemada was presented. Sharing ideas, experience, and techniques, and trying to respond to the question about how art can be useful against oppression and violence and injustice, when nothing seems to be, they all agree in considering theater as a mean to, quote, activate the audience, you, and teaching the people to take action, make the people learn to take action, Julian Beck says. Julian Beck says, teach people, and Boal say, it's better when the people learn, and you see the difference. When reduced to explain and tell, like the French theater does, some French guys from the audience says, they are so polemic, isn't it? The French guy in the audience that says, in France, they just tell, speak and explain. It is not to be considered revolutionary. Instead, seems to everyone essential that idea that art itself must be liberated as a public domain involving physical participation, making community and engaging people in direct action, as an Harlem actor and activist Santiago put it, as Thomas said, his name is Santiago. We're trying to understand. He says the aim is to be direct action. And suddenly this word, they kind of put together. It's kind of really important play. Then it is true. So performance is not enough. Quote, audience and actors may leave the space and do something useful together, like open all the prisons, as Beck proposes. But it is true that, quote, when the spectator comes on scene and breaks repression, he becomes capable of vote and understands that revolutionary action is possible for him, said Judith. This woman has understood everything. And the two men were there listening. Then, very interesting. What they agree that the artist's function is to offer her skills in order to activate people. The question is how to succeed in doing this, since repression acts in different ways in Brazil and in the US or in Europe. And they agree that even when provoking the most violent repressive action, art cannot respond but Army, this is where people, children, women, workers, the poorer of the poorer, who seem unarmed and defenseless, without, and arms, without, so that each person can develop his or her own creative potential. The central idea is that empowering people is bringing to a state of self-recognition of their role, no longer as oppressor, nor as a victim, but as someone who acts, who liberates, who transforms. In the sequence, living in Europe in the so-called years of lead, such as Wow, Living Theatre as a group detached as well, its work from the increasingly esoteric tendency of other very known Arcturian groups, such as Jerzy Grotowski, Theatre Laboratory in Italy, and asserted conviction of leading the revolution away from armed struggle, thus contradicting the trend of the majority of activist theatre groups. Did I understand well this? Did I explain well this? Wow, Living Theatre, where a country culture, during the years of lead in Europe, where all the theatre group went to terrorism or agreed with terrorism, and they were very non-violent. And this came up before, was an understanding that came with them. It seemed to me a very strong, maybe reciprocal influence between Boal and Living Theatre to consider theatre as the best and only non-violent device for collective reflection in order to reveal power structures and pacificate some. Fourth idea. As I say, Boal's idea to enhance the relational process more than the artwork product, in fact, his decision to share authorship. I didn't explain very well this, I will explain, which is evident in his book, where words are shared with a multitude of participants and theorists. It is worth reading to understand, but it's just, very important. It is worth noting that throughout his career, Boal was constantly resisting both his own domestication as an artist holder of international fame and copyright, and the abduction of techniques by hegemonic apparatus like TV or art market. We always say, do what you want with the techniques, but don't call theater the best. In forum, theater, and other Boal's games, people become artists through the action of creating, not submitted to further hierarchies. This, unlike other relational experiences in contemporary art, as proposed by Bourriaud, which I quoted, depending on visibility granted by exclusive exhibition in canonical places, such as museums and galleries, and depending finally on the fame of media legitimization, while participation in this context of relational art sometimes is a rhetorical formula, sometimes is merely promotional. Is it clear? Then this is the context of actual activists. Instead, the spectator participation is articulated as the event itself. In itself, artistic practice inaugurates radically common spaces. Then I could say that the event summons the community to prove that it is capable of providing experience which emancipates itself from control regimes exercised by the state and ultimately by society itself. It would be appropriate to call this performative experience form of governing oneself and others, like Foucault's force. In the legislative theater technique, which I don't know if everyone knows, initially developed by Boal after his return to Brazil in '96, during a session of a theater forum, a set of real legal advisors is set up in order to draft bills after performative intervention by spectators. Then they just take notes, the advocates and the people from the Senate, from the Cabinet, and they take notes. And in the end of the foreign theater, they say, well, what would propose works, for example, in a violence scene, in domestic violence? Someone proposed to kill the husband. No, this is not legal. We cannot transform this in law. And someone proposed to call the neighbors and make an association. Yeah, maybe this already exists. For example, there is a law, but this law doesn't work because of it. Someone proposed something that no one thinking. Now, this can become a law. Then we will do the law. You understand? It works like that. Then there is a specialist set up. She's looking at me very, very, very clarify because
I'm thinking, how can I come to this establishment?
okay, and you have to go. Then I will try to, well, maybe I would make a conclusion, not immediate, okay, but concluding this point and pulling to and going to the conclusion just to have the final question. Have you got some questions?
Yeah.
Then okay, I'm sorry, I have patience. I really made a lot of example more than was expected. Then the game, just to explain, then the game reproduces the legal framework with the difference of giving, speaking, and power back to the citizen artists who actually legislate, without delegating this power to anyone, nor submitting themselves to the bureaucratic barriers which hinder representative democracy. I wanted to say that Daniel is here, and he is a legal specialist, and we worked together, and he worked as well as an advocate in a refugee workshop in which we made legislative theater with refugee people in the world 2 years ago. And it's really organized. Then Daniel articulated all the apparatus. Because you cannot do this alone, you have to organize the sites, otherwise it doesn't work. Then it's quite complex. Then citizen artists actually legislate without delegating the power to anyone. After the game, the sequence of political actions interacting with real democratic institutions aim to guarantee continuity to the struggle for those objectives and to reach them if a law proposed by the community during the theater session is approved by legislative power. The spectators assembly form a kind of in this case of heterotopia, you see that also, which is a parallel dimension in which, once suspended the usual rule, the community produces its analysis of the discipline vigor and proposes changes in the form of effective action, which instigates the deconstruction and reinvention of norms which legitimate other forms of seeing and living in the world. The assembly multiplies the real space in a perceptive dimension where reality occurs as it is and simultaneously as it could be. I would call it concrete utopia, marked by the ideal characteristic of coexistence, such as free expression of desires, accessibility, and non-violence, which are the rules of the game, as we see. Of course, this idea evokes the belief, the drifting effect as practiced by the French situationists, taking their ties. Do you know this? The biography is very funny, very interesting, which were performative behavior in public spaces in order to overlap and open perceptive gaps called autonomous temporary zones. That's. And I think that Boal is fighting that, yes, of course, because of the temporary essence of it, because this is a crucial. It is temporary, it's not forever, it's temporary, it's an experience. Where the process by could be stimulated by the most diverse epiphanies. Boal's idea is proliferating within the official map of our cities, of autonomous spaces, although temporary, with no alienation, no coercion, no control, where each citizen may effectively exercise his citizenship, expressing desires and proposing laws. Under different conditions that atypical situations continue till the present moment and can be understood when inserted in the vast popular education policy movement established in Brazil by the 1988 Constitution and especially promoted by the government of President Lula. And we have, unhappily, a very big crisis recently, but I understand that this was a movement. Here resides Boal's Latin American friendship. His capacity to be radically innovative while updating his previous ideas beneath the countercultural movement of 68, 30 years later and after living 2 decades in exile. And though the relationship with pedagogical structures and provokes, art reinvents the world, since it is proposed not as an art work, but as a fully participatory dimension in which the real norms are at the same time represented, contested, and subverted. And I stop here. I just will tell you that the conclusion was about what Boal did in writing Torquemada. If someone is interested after the question, I can try to explain.
speaking. Okay, I thank you for all the attention and sorry for delaying, and I would like to go into the section.
Before the question is not a question, thank you so much for the call. I just wanted to say, I'm sure, I don't know if you know, I'm sure you've heard, but maybe other people don't know. We have in Brazil, in Belo Horizonte, in the municipal Câmara de Vereadores, is where they make the municipal laws. We have an actress who is a vereador, and she has set up Augusto Boal's legislative theater in that Câmara de Vereadores, and it's been working for 4 years. So people go there on certain days and they can act the play according to Boal's technique, and they can generate new laws. So this is not something that is old, it's very nowadays practice. It's very useful, it's a very political tool. Thank you. I'm sorry, where is this happening? It's happening in Belo Horizonte, which is a city close to Rio in Brazil. Yeah.
But it is happening in Porto, for example. It is happening in India directly. I work with the legislative theater, not just with the refugees in Rio, but as well with women in a lot of places in Brazil, and elsewhere with another theater, the progressive technique. Then it's really not ended. Of course, you have to build a situation to make a continuity, because performance is not enough. You need social acting.
Yeah, you have a strong beginning there.
Yeah.
Then it comes from the community.
Yeah.
So nobody knows better what they need than the actual community.
Yeah. If you will have some time to come next week, I will show one of the regions together on the 2 minutes in the design. And they made the logo. It's spectacular. Someone else on there? Yeah.
Thank you so much. Very interesting and I'm inspired by your work. So and I was struck by the idea of the body having a memory and the body as a repertoire, like you said. I'm an anthropologist. I'm not an expert for so the body. We discussed the body within anthropology, but I think it's quite different. So maybe that's why it got me. I was wondering if this body can be also framed as a collective body, considering, for instance, a community or some group experience with the theater of press, for instance. In a sense, a collective body, in a sense of a communitarian one, considering some shared experiences and repertoires, for instance, like, of course, shared experiences will mark bodies in different ways, but some experiences can also be shared as one. I'm thinking especially about violence or state violence, for instance, in a given community, in a given place. Can we think about this body as a collective one and the repertoires as collective ones, beyond the individual sense of body?
Yeah. I would really like to involve Professor Vannucci, but I have an answer to this, a little answer, which maybe we can discuss after. Which is, I think that an interesting idea that Boal certainly reflects is the paresia idea, but then the paresia is speaking freely. It's not to take the truth, it's to take it away, to speak freely. And what happens is that it is a kind of speech act, the paresia, which is the one that Antigone does in front of Creonte, which is the one that the victim not submitted and impressive in the convention of law. does in front of the talent and all the community, and maybe this is the last thing that she does, like a team for them. After that, she does, and she knows that. But what happens is that the talent cannot stop her. And then paresia, it's an eruption in the public space, and people say that this is the founding act of democracy. And it is, of course, displacement. And we see the body is a repertoire of the public because the displacement of the body is, of course, the same that we all ask the spectators do what we don't see. But principally, it obliges the community to take responsibility on this part. Because this movement puts all of them at risk, because question the power as itself, not for the reasons of the power. And I think that in this case, Foucault describes, if I remember well, the cynical philosopher body, making the protest in public, he says, and he says, making the body the theater of the truth. I don't know exactly what that means, but it's another beautiful images. Because so doing, what happens is that this body projects its voice in the political space. It becomes a political body because it demands the refounding of the community. There is a beautiful narration of a foreign theater which is done in south of Italy, in Godrano, in Sicily. And he said that the fictional set in South Italy is so strong all the time that the power, the institution, wanted to be present, and they didn't really understand that it was fictional. Then the major entered in scene as himself. Wonderful, all was seen, all was made clear to everyone, and then. I wanted to go back to the possibility of the body assuming this political power, like being a repertoire of a common responsibility and being at risk, like a testimony. When Foucault described this body, he convokes the magnificent and simple images of the corpus. He said that this is the corpus. And it's kind of utopical body, yeah, utopic. And I think that the corpus utopic, it's the idea of when you enter in the stage, in a simple theater form, you really feel like your body. If you leave it happening, because you are yourself, and at the same time you are the whole community. I think someone from home.
A question.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it's properly a question, but I would like to know more about the experience with refugees, and I'm interested in that because you are talking about Antigona and the figure of the victim, and how Antigona shows that victim that reacts to this place where the victim has no option, right? So she turned herself in a political subject.
Yeah.
And I work with refugees too. And one thing that we are also noticing about refugees is that the place of victim is a very cruel place, a very a place where one has no agents through that place. You understand? So I'm very interested in how the theater thinking about Ball's approach can like counter propose, like almost counter to these other narratives of victim and to these other forms of testimony, which are more
restricting, constraining the agency of the subjects. And then it could be like, if you're talking about theater or other creative stages. I don't know.
Yeah, someone wants to answer? So Danielle could say things there. I would like to, well, we really, Danielle and me and other people were really reflected about how to treat this, this group, which is not group, you know, because the beginning for me was, I'm Italian, was human history is refugees history. We're all refugees. Then the base for me was anatomy. Our work, our video, isn't it, Daniel, was called Nós Refugiados. Then the basis was, and this was Daniel instrumentalizing with a very strong legal framework, which I didn't know. For example, the Brazilian law, Daniel, if I'm wrong, correct me. Brazilian law consider that the status of refugee is a status of citizenship. But the problem is that citizenship is not an equal status in Brazil. Then you have not equal citizenship. Because like in Nuremberg, you have citizens A series, B series, and C series, and excluded them. I didn't want to quote him because I don't know if he anticipates Wilson, but Agamben, an Italian philosopher, had a little say, very beautiful, on the concept of popolo, people, popolo in English, really people, popolo, which is at the same time the old owner of power. At the same time, popolo is the one that is excluded from power. Then this is clearly visible in Brazil, that you have, you know, and it's a cognitive and political separation. Then what happens is that when you work with this idea of, for example, refugiado, you are stimulating people. Remember that I was like very sitting in calling the laboratory with this title, enormous title, that it was a laboratory for refugee, pessoas refugiadas, pessoas pedindo refúgio, pessoas brasileiras, cidadão de todos, pessoas que andam e respiram, e andam por aí. And this is the people that breath and wander around, which is a quotation by Marcel Duchamp.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Then the title was enormous, and then I was saying to me, "Oh, this we have to write." Yeah, that's right. The idea was trying to understand what is to be citizen, and how we can understand citizenship without excluding anyone. Because if you begin to work the idea of including, is because you are already excluded someone.
Ah, você conseguiu?
Hi, do you hear me?
Verdade. Yeah, can you hear you?
Yes, my internet connection is not the best, so I'll try my best to say something about this topic, which really is a nice topic to me. I'm very happy and very glad to hear Alessandra talking about this work we were working on together, and I think it turns out that talking about bringing all these people together was also an important tool to change conflicts, people disagreeing about hosting refugee people in their country. You know, this is a problem all over the world, even in Brazil. So we had experiences that could prove that this approach helps to change this key of a conflict into allies. So when Brazilian people realized that most of the rights that refugees were claiming, they didn't have it neither. So many of our participants begin to think, oh, so I think we should fight together against someone and not get it, instead of fighting with each other. Of course, it sounds very optimistic, very utopian, and it didn't happen all over Brazil, but it's a tool, and it's something that could inspire future works with representative press. Sorry, my internet connection is not the best. I hope you could get what I just said. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. Obrigada. I wanted to add something because he was the joker in many of our. We made a data forum, which was what we now say, and he was a joker. And remember, Danny, I wanted to say two things that we understood in 2 moments. The first was the allies, maybe everyone, and principally children, because children, which really will sometimes add some kind of resistance to put inside because they are not in his way, they are not politically ready to speak. But children, in our case, remember, Danny, they were the real mediator, because children of refugees families are the ones that go with this father to defend in the bureaucracy, because we know that children are Jews and they learn language in 2 months, and they are already Brazilian in 1 year in the case, and then they are the real mediators, and they can speak to everyone freely. Then the allies may be children, and we really pointed out this, and we did some legislative theater in children's school in Rio, very little children. And the second thing that I wanted to point out is that we discovered that a very good thing to do in the theater forum in the middle of the playing of the second phase is to stop them and say, okay, then stop. We're confused. I will. Yeah. Then now we stop and we do little groups like you three, and you talk 10 minutes. And then you made a collective intervention. This was genius, wasn't it? Because this changed really the quality of the interviews. Because it is important that this corpo topic becomes reality. Then people just talking a little bit. They understand that I can say, no, because I know a journalist from Globo, I will call the journalist. And they say, no, but this, okay, but this all more now. But we can make a sitting, and I don't know, and we think we can learn more. Then when it's if I wanted to say that, what do you think? I think that this was interesting, and I transferred this interval in the exercise of joking to all my form theater. I think it's very interesting. Stop, really talk, and then make it a collective intervention instead of an individual intervention. But in this case, the group choose someone to really be a corporate record. Who goes there and plays. Then on the other question that she made, of course, there is all occupation should be done about their failure. Of course, but this is not about law. For that, other point not about law, but as a concept about the repertoire instead of the archive, and the repertoire is what the body memorizes as a traumatic experience, and the sequences of its capability to form this experience. Now, the other question, in your question, was there is a difference among victim and aggressive? Yes, it's good. I really could not now explain. If we have some time, I'll explain maybe with talking about it, because we have some time. But in the practice, the difference is radical. Like I do a play normally, I cannot do a game now with you because of the tables, but it's a question of willing. Then if someone doesn't want to react, a group of people do everything with them. but someone wants to react, no one can do anything with his body, like for example, transporting Amanda from there to there. I do this exercise normally for people understanding which is the difference between being victim and oppressed. And I want to say that while in any moment, never question the trauma of the victim. We do not do anything with the trauma of the victim. If a woman was raped, I can't do anything with it. And it's not fair. I really cannot do anything. I'm sorry, but I can't do anything. Theater of oppressed work with the oppression. It's not a kind of creating trauma. It's a kind of working with the willing of this not happening anymore, or trying to, and that it is a political, it's not a therapeutical approach.
Maybe in a social level, it would be I mean, the social society as a
In society as about it, yeah, yeah. I think this is Shakina says that, you know.
Yeah, he does say that
It's a tricky phrase, which I would like to remember, but I don't remember exactly when I don't quote it. It's like search.
7:36, because when he's in the last question and 7:30.
If there is no question, I can explain the Torquemada thing that everybody knows that I really. Then Torquemada, okay? It's very good. Then Torquemada is like an uncanny play by Boal. He wrote, I directed Torquemada. I couldn't believe what had happened to me. I needed to see it happen outside of me on stage so that I could see myself, separating myself from myself. Separate my body out there and the world. Me directing myself through the act. Only then would I understand. The play, first presented, as I said, in New York in English, began with a prologue. In the prologue, a character called playwright is tortured. On scene. It's tortured by Torquemada, which is an allegoric personage, and 3 soldiers. At the end of the scene, a character called Athos says, this play was written in Tiradentes jail in São Paulo in 71. It was written in Spain at the end of the Middle Ages, and it keeps being written in Chile, in Paraguay, in South Africa. What war means for was written is still being written is a claim for audience, especially American audience, assuming responsibility for what keeps going, and it is on stage and it is obscene, it's quite impossible to see that, assuming the responsibility on that in every Torquemada jails all around the world. Besides this, he is declaring that he wrote the scene in the jail where he was acting. You see? Then it's so true. And he says, quote, in rehearsal, the students didn't say, when the playwright is hung up, they said to me, when you are hung up, it was as if I had come back from a very distant place to report unbelievable facts. Quote, and the term report interests me a lot, because it's different to perform, which will always use, than in this case, you report. And perform usually used by critics in American newspapers. Then report is adopted as a term of a very strong and uncanny idea of it. The critical are quite shocking. It's a documentary genre, of course, in which the dramaturg, person and personage, sorry for the distinction, assume the role of a witness, even if separated from the experience, he was a victim and a survivor by the fictional distancing provided by stage. The idea of a scene, which today we may describe as autofictional, but it's quite radical autofictional, in which the style scenes being located, which is being affected. The victim distance from trauma, then returns in Boal's methodology as a practical device. And I think I can answer a little bit better to you. As a practical device, in order to witness and survive, because it's not the case of dying, witness and survive, the victim distances from trauma and look at from the outside, from another point of view or interpreted by another body. I think this is quite an interpretation. Whether oppression is represented as dramatic conflict with real antagonists, as in theory technique, or as the oppressed inner conflict with their own traumatic memories, archetypes, and the internalized antagonist, as in rainbow novel of desire techniques, while always proposes the oppressive distances from oppression and analyzes it through magnetic means inside the community, which assumes responsibility, despite first person, and searches for alternatives. Then, do you know what this means? This means dismantling completely the idea of destiny, of individual destiny. Because the causes of torture, it says, that are the colonial condition. He says this in play. Then Torquemada does a very long economic explanation at second moment of how capitalism functions. It's completely American, but it's quite interesting, because at this moment, as in concluding, I wanted to say that while methodology and this debate about the function of art and artists, what theater serves? Who uses it? Who has to use it? Puts in practice not just the horizontality and reciprocity of pedagogical relationships that are proposed by Freire, but at the same time claiming demands and affirmative use of mimetic arts as a cognitive weapons against hegemonic regimes and the traumatic consequences of violence that hegemonic regimes provokes. In this sense, while since the 60s, the 70s, in my opinion, had ideas which were recognized later as key concept of a possible southern epistemological liberation front.
That's sexy. Torquemada.
Torquemada, I love it, and Danielle was acting in it. Sometimes he was doing Torquemada.
It's very interesting because the moments, because I will focus on the individual. So it's
yeah, to understand this more, I think that it's not the case that Torquemada is not played as a performance. Well, I have this lecture here. Then we made another lecture in Argentina in 72. And then we had a lecture, a dramatic staging, right, but not really show in Daniel Miasuda, in Martins Pena School and some theater schools in Rio with 15 students. And in my school as well, which I want to thank for the period of researching, which is started in Alessandra Vannucci, in Public University in Brazil, and but never on stage. It's difficult, I as a stage director, I try to put on stage, and this is recently La Mama, a torture commentary and the torture scene, and it's really, we are not able to do that, but it's quite impossible because it erupts in a regime of visibility where this is not possible to be seen. Because if you put an actress that is saying, for example, a testimony, the depoimento, the deposition to the commissioner, where someone says, a woman tells that she was tortured in how. You put this in the mouth of an actress, which tell this and say, it's obscene. Because or you torture the actress, actually, you cannot do that, or you don't torture and she's acting. Then no, as well. It's quite difficult, not easy. Then it's tricky what say do with Torquemada because it writes a play that is quite unstable. It's very difficult to stay. But I think that this solution, which I explained, is central for all his methodology. We understand that he has to exclude the victim from the political stage. And through fiction transforming the oppressed. Then the oppressed is a collective body. And the same testimony who has been tortured can see it and look at it. Do you understand that? It seems quite clear to me. Can look at it and say, it's clear. It's not to say I could do different. Of course not. But you are tortured. You cannot do different. But you can analyze the political condition, the economical causes, and why this is a public scene and not an individual destiny. And then when you see how a public scene is constructed, as for Hegel, you can reconstruct. And there's this beautiful phrase that you are always quoted. It's a bit complicated, but for one that does give an example and say reality must be shown in a way that it seems not impossible to change. If you go to Rio de Janeiro and walk through the street of the favela Maré, this phrase is in every wall. Reality must be represented in a way that it doesn't seem natural. Because if you represent reality as if it is natural, inevitable, you cannot change. You must show reality in a way that it is clear that it may change. Do you understand? This is the responsibility of the artist. This is not the spectator. This is the artist. And we have a duty. You're back. Okay. Someone is there.
It's Tom Walker. His name is
You want me to say something?
Yeah. Conclusion.
Well, I never knew Augusto Boal, but I always knew that the work in the Living Theater was very much parallel to the Theater of the Oppressed. We shared the same goals, the same political points of view for the most part. Augusto was a little more Marxist. Judith Molina and Julian Beck were a little more anarchist, pacifist. But the forms we used, the theatrical forms and the commitment to work with people on their own basis on the street, for example, this informed our work in our theater. And so we were very much similar, very parallel. And I was, very young. Judith and Julian stayed in touch with Augusto. I didn't have that much contact with him, although I did work with Celia Boal in the wonderful public act that Alessandra directed in Ouro Preto, Brazil in 2011. And we found that the Living Theater ideas and forms fit together with those of Boal very beautifully. And we created a beautiful collective event. So I'll leave it at that. There's a lot of similarity, a lot of connection.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alessandra.
Thank you, Renata. And for the ones that are here, and I'm sorry for the one that are virtually here, there's some food.
Pão de queijo, gente.
Thank you very much. It was a big pleasure. Thank you. It was